A fist slammed into the side of a rusted pickup truck. Gravel sprayed against denim boots as a young man stumbled backward. A leather belt snapped against the wooden porch rail. The screen door banged open, and a tall man with iron in his shoulders stepped out. He pointed one shaking finger toward the gate. He spoke 5 words. "Get off my land, boy." The young man wiped blood from his lip and looked toward the kitchen window. A woman stood inside crying. She did not come out. Behind her, 2 brothers turned their faces away. A young sister covered her mouth. The young man picked up a torn canvas bag from the dirt. He walked down the long gravel road alone. He did not look back. 52 years later, he came home holding an envelope nobody knew existed. His name was Daniel Cromwell. Stay with me on this one. Daniel was 19 years old when his father threw him off the ranch. The Cromwell place sat on 20,000 acres of dry Montana grass. Cattle moved across it like slow brown clouds. The main house was built of cedar logs cut by his grandfather. The barn smelled of leather and hay and old motor oil. Daniel had worked that land since he could walk. He knew every fence line. He knew where the water gathered after spring rain. He knew the names of every cow in the South herd. He had planned to live there until he died. Then he met a girl named Eleanor Hayes. She worked at the diner in town. She wore a yellow apron and tied her hair back with a blue ribbon. She poured coffee with both hands because the pot was heavy. She remembered every customer's order without writing it down. Daniel started driving 20 miles each Saturday just to sit at the counter. He spent 3 months saying hello before he asked her to a movie. She said yes. They went to a drive-in theater outside Billings and watched a Western neither of them remembered later. He walked her to her father's house at midnight. He kissed her on the cheek. He drove home with the windows down, singing along to the radio. His father was waiting on the porch. The old man's name was Eugene Cromwell. Eugene was 63 years old that summer. He stood 6'4" with hands the size of dinner plates. He had built the ranch from nothing after the war. He had buried 2 infant sons in the family plot. He had run off a bank inspector with a shotgun in 1959. People in 3 counties called him Mr. Cromwell and meant it. Eugene asked Daniel where he had been. Daniel told him. Eugene asked the girl's last name. Daniel told him that too. Eugene's jaw went tight. He said, "You will not see that girl again." Daniel asked why. Eugene did not answer. For 6 weeks, Daniel kept seeing Eleanor in secret. They met at the river bend behind the old grain silo. They held hands under a cottonwood tree. They talked about getting married after Daniel turned 21 and could draw his share of the ranch. Eleanor said her father liked Daniel. Eleanor said her mother had baked a peach pie for him. Daniel told her about the cedar log house and the South herd and the spot by the creek where he wanted to build their own cabin. He believed every word he said. On a Sunday in August, Eugene caught them. He had followed Daniel in the old farm truck. He stepped out from behind a stand of pines and grabbed Daniel by the collar. He dragged him to the truck. He drove back to the ranch in silence. When they pulled up to the house, Eugene's wife, Marlene, was on the porch with the other 4 children. The 2 older brothers were Wyatt and Caleb. The younger sister was Ruth. The youngest brother was a boy of 14 named Joseph, who would later become a deputy sheriff. They were all watching. Eugene threw Daniel onto the gravel. He hit him 3 times in the ribs. He told him he had 1 hour to pack his things. Marlene tried to step forward, and Eugene held up his hand and she stopped. Daniel went inside. He put 2 pairs of jeans and 3 shirts, and a Bible and a photograph of his mother into a canvas duffel bag. He came out. Eugene stood at the bottom of the porch with the belt in his hand. He pointed at the road. He said, "You are no son of mine. You will not write your mother. You will not call this house. You will not set foot on Cromwell land again. Do you understand me, boy?" Daniel said, "Yes, sir." He walked down the gravel road. He did not look back. He hitchhiked into town. He went to the diner. Alina was working the night shift. He told her what had happened. She took off her apron and walked out with him. They got married 3 days later at the courthouse in Bozeman. They had $18 between them. They drove east in Alina's father's old Ford until the gas ran out somewhere in North Dakota. Daniel got a job at a feedlot mucking pens. Alina got a job at a hospital cafeteria. They rented a single room above a laundromat. They were happy. The years moved the way years do. Daniel never heard from his family. He sent a card to his mother every Christmas for the first 10 years and never got an answer. He learned later that Eugene burned each one in the kitchen stove without opening it. Marlene died of a stroke in 1986. Daniel did not know until 6 months after the funeral when a cousin called from Spokane to tell him. He drove all night to the cemetery in Montana. He stood at her grave at 4 in the morning. He did not go to the ranch. He kept his promise to his father even then. Daniel and Alina had 2 children, a daughter named Rose and a son named Samuel. They raised them in a small house in Fargo. Daniel worked his way up at the feedlot until he was running the place. Alina went back to school and became a nurse. They paid off their mortgage. They sent both kids to college. They never had much money, but they had enough. Alina died of cancer in the spring of 2019. Daniel was 67 years old. He sat by her bed and held her hand for 3 days. Her last words to him were, "Don't go back there, Danny. Not unless you have to." In the fall of 2023, a letter arrived at his small house in Fargo. It came in a thick cream envelope with a Montana return address. The handwriting was his father's. Daniel had not seen that handwriting in 52 years. His hands shook so hard he had to set the envelope on the kitchen table and stare at it for an hour before he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. There was also a second sealed envelope, inside marked Last Will and Testament of Eugene Cromwell. The letter on the single sheet was short. It said, "Daniel, I am dying. The doctor gives me a month. There are things I should have told you and never did. The sealed envelope holds my real will. The one my lawyer has is a lie I told to keep peace. Bring this to the funeral reception. Lay it on the dining table where your mother used to set the Sunday roast. Then ask Ezekiel Boone to stand up. He will know what to say. I am sorry, boy. I was wrong about her and wrong about you and wrong about the worst thing too. Your father." Daniel sat at the kitchen table until the sun went down. He did not open the second envelope. He understood that his father wanted it opened in front of the family. He poured himself a glass of water. He drank it slowly. He thought about Alina's last words. Then he stood up and walked outside and looked at the stars over the prairie. He went back inside and packed a small bag. 3 weeks later, Eugene Cromwell died. The notice ran in the Billings Gazette. The funeral was set for a Saturday at the White Clapboard Church off Highway 191. Daniel left Fargo on Friday morning in his battered 1996 Ford pickup. He drove west across North Dakota with the sealed envelope in a folder on the passenger seat. He stopped twice for coffee. He arrived in the town near the ranch on Friday evening. He stayed at a motel where the desk clerk did not recognize the Cromwell name on his license. He slept 4 hours. The funeral was at 10 the next morning. Daniel did not go to the church. He sat in his truck at a turnout on the highway and watched the cars drive past. He saw a black Cadillac he did not recognize. He saw a sheriff's cruiser that he guessed belonged to his younger brother Joseph. He saw a long line of pickup trucks driven by ranch hands and neighbors. He did not see any face he could match to a memory of his siblings. They had all grown old without him watching. After the service, the cars headed back toward the ranch. The reception was at the main house. The road to the Cromwell place ran for 4 miles off the highway. Daniel waited an hour after the last car turned in. Then he started his engine. He drove slowly. The gravel popped under his tires the same way it had when he was 19. The cedar log house came into view at the top of the rise. Cars filled the yard. Pickup trucks lined the fence. Smoke rose from the chimney. People moved on the porch. Daniel parked at the far end of the row. He sat for a long moment with his hands on the wheel. He picked up the folder. He got out. He walked across the gravel toward the house with the sealed envelope under his arm. A few people noticed him. One man squinted and frowned and turned to whisper to a woman beside him. Daniel did not stop. He climbed the porch steps. He opened the screen door. He stepped inside. The dining room was full. 20 or 30 people stood around with plates of food. The long oak table where his mother had served Sunday dinner was covered in casserole dishes and a glazed ham and a coffee urn. At the head of the table sat his oldest brother Wyatt. Wyatt was 75 now and bald and thick around the middle. He held a small glass of bourbon. He looked up when Daniel walked in. His mouth fell open. The room went quiet by degrees as people followed his gaze. Within 10 seconds, the only sound was the kitchen clock ticking against the wall. Daniel walked to the table. He did not greet anyone. He set the sealed envelope down on the oak surface between the ham and the bowl of mashed potatoes. He stepped back. He waited. Wyatt found his voice first. He laughed. It was a short, hard laugh without joy in it. He said, "Well, I'll be damned. Look what the wind blew in. Caleb, come see this." The second brother Caleb pushed through the crowd. Caleb was 72 and still wiry from years on horseback. He stared at Daniel like a man staring at a corpse that had just sat up. Ruth, the sister, came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She made a small sound in her throat. She did not speak. Then a younger man stepped forward. He was tall and well-built with a sharp haircut and an expensive black suit. He looked about 40. He carried himself like a man who was used to being listened to. He said, "Excuse me, sir, but this is a private family gathering." Daniel said, "I know whose family it is." The young man said, "I am Travis Cromwell. I am Wyatt's son. I do not know who you are, but I will ask you to leave." Daniel said, "I am your Uncle Daniel." The young man's face hardened. He pulled a phone from his pocket. He said, "I am calling the sheriff." Wyatt waved a hand at him. Wyatt said, "Put the phone down, Travis. This will sort itself in 5 minutes." Wyatt picked up the envelope. He turned it over in his hands. He read the writing on the front. His brow furrowed. He looked up at Daniel. He said, "What is this?" Daniel said, "Open it and read it out loud." Wyatt laughed again. He said, "You walk in here after 50 years on the day we put our father in the ground, and you tell me what to do in my own house." Daniel said, "It is not your house yet, Wyatt. Open the envelope." The room went very quiet. The kitchen clock ticked. A baby cried somewhere in the back of the house and was hushed. Wyatt's hand moved slowly. He slid a thumb under the flap. He tore it open. He pulled out 3 sheets of paper. He started to read. His eyes moved across the first page. His face changed. The color drained out of it. He read faster. He turned to the second page. His mouth opened. He looked up at Daniel. He looked down again. He read the third page. He set the papers on the table. He looked across at Caleb. He said, "This can't be right." Caleb grabbed the papers. He read them. Ruth stepped forward and read over his shoulder. She put a hand to her mouth. The phone was still in Travis's hand, but he had forgotten about it. Caleb looked at Daniel. Caleb said, "Where did you get this?" Daniel said, "Our father mailed it to me 3 weeks before he died. He told me to bring it here. He told me to lay it on this table. He told me to ask Ezekiel Boone to stand up." A chair scraped quietly in the corner of the room. Every head turned. In a wooden chair pushed against the far wall sat an old man no one had been paying attention to. He was small and stooped with a face like dried leather. He wore a clean denim shirt buttoned to the throat. His hands rested on his knees. His name was Ezekiel Boone. He had worked on the Cromwell Ranch as a hand for 47 years. He had a room above the bunkhouse and ate his meals with the crew. He never spoke unless spoken to. Most of the family treated him like a piece of furniture they were used to. Ezekiel stood up. The whole room watched him. He took 2 slow steps forward. He stopped in front of Daniel. He took off his hat. He held it against his chest. He said, "Hello, Daniel. It has been a long time." Daniel said, "Hello, Mr. Boone." Ezekiel turned to face the rest of the family. He said, "Your father asked me to tell you all something when this envelope was opened. I've been waiting 52 years to say it." He cleared his throat. He looked at Daniel. He looked at Wyatt. He spoke in a voice that was quiet but very clear. He said, "Daniel did not steal that money in 1971. I did. Eugene knew it. Eugene threw Daniel out to protect me because I had nowhere else to go, and Daniel had a girl who would take him in. That was the bargain we made, and Daniel never knew about it." The room did not move. Wyatt's mouth opened. Daniel turned slowly to look at the old ranch hand. His eyes were wet, but he did not blink. He said, "What money, Mr. Boone?" Ezekiel said, "The $38,000 from the cattle sale that went missing the summer your father threw you out. The money your brothers blamed you for taking when you ran off with a leaner. The money that was used as the reason in every story your family told themselves about why you were gone." Daniel did not know about that money. He had been told nothing. He had carried his father's hatred for 52 years, thinking it was about a leaner alone. He looked at Wyatt. He said, "You told people I stole." Wyatt's face had gone gray. He said, "Father told us." He said, "You ran because of the money." Caleb said, "We always believed it." Ruth said, "Oh God, Daniel." Travis stood by the wall with his phone limp in his hand. If you are still with me, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, and it helps me keep telling stories like this one. Then come right back, because what happens next is the part nobody in that room saw coming. Ezekiel was not finished. He held up one hand. He said, "There is more." He said, "Sit down, Wyatt." Wyatt sat. Ezekiel said, "Your father wrote the second part for me, say only if anyone in this room called Daniel a thief today." Travis Cromwell looked at his father. He had called Daniel a thief by accusation when he tried to call the sheriff. The threat counted. Ezekiel knew it. The family knew it. Ezekiel said, "The money was not stolen for me. It was stolen for a man named Robert Hayes." That was Eleanor's father. Robert Hayes was about to lose his small ranch to the bank. Eugene Cromwell took $38,000 from the cattle sale and gave it to Robert Hayes in cash because he had once promised Robert's father in the war that he would never let a Hayes go under. Eugene could not tell his own family because they would have hated him for it. So he told them I had stolen it and that Daniel had run off because of it. He fired me from the books that day and rehired me 3 months later under a different arrangement. I lived above the bunkhouse for the rest of my working life as part of what he owed me for keeping silent. The room was perfectly still. Eleanor's father. Daniel had married Eleanor without knowing his own father had saved her family. He had spent 52 years believing his father hated him for choosing Eleanor when the truth was that Eugene Cromwell had quietly paid to keep Eleanor's family on their land. Daniel sat down on a chair behind him because his knees would not hold him. Wyatt stood up slowly. He walked to the table. He picked up the 3 sheets of paper again. He read aloud, this time in a voice that shook. The will divided the ranch into 5 equal shares for the 5 children of Eugene and Marlene Cromwell. Daniel was named first. Wyatt was named second. Then Caleb. Then Ruth. Then Joseph. There was also a separate bequest. The cedar log house and the 80 acres surrounding it were given outright and free of any condition to Daniel Cromwell, as a return of what was taken from him on the day he was disowned. Wyatt's voice broke on the last sentence. He set the papers down. He did not look at his brother. There was a final paragraph. It was a personal note from Eugene. Wyatt read it because Daniel could not. The note said to my son Daniel, I told you that you were not my son. I was a coward. You were the best of us. I watched you walk down that road, and I watched the dust settle, and I never had another moment of peace. Forgive me if you can. If you cannot, then take the house and the 80 acres, and know I died understanding what I did. Your father, Eugene. Daniel put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once and then steadied. The room remained silent except for the kitchen clock. Then Ruth crossed the floor. She knelt in front of him. She took his hand away from his face. She said, Danny. She said, I am so sorry. She said, we believed him. We were children. We grew up believing him. Daniel said, I know, Ruth. He said, I know. Caleb came next. Caleb did not kneel. He stood in front of Daniel with his hat in his hands and his eyes wet. He said, Brother, I have hated you for 50 years for nothing. Daniel said, you didn't know. Caleb said, that is not an excuse. Wyatt came last. Wyatt did not speak at first. He just put a hand on Daniel's shoulder and stood there. After a long moment, Wyatt said, the house is yours, Daniel. The land is yours. Whatever you want of all of this. Daniel shook his head. He said, I do not want it, Wyatt. Not the way you think. He stood up. He walked to the table. He picked up the 3 sheets of paper. He folded them carefully. He put them back in the envelope. He looked around the room. He said, I am going to honor the will exactly as our father wrote it. Each of you gets your share. I get the house and the 80 acres. But the house is not going to be a house. The 80 acres are not going to be pasture. I am going to turn that piece of land into something else. I'm going to call it the Hayes Cromwell Place. It will be a working ranch and a home for kids who have nowhere to go. Boys and girls who got thrown out of their families. Kids like I was. They will live in the cedar log house. They will eat at this table. They will learn to work cattle. They will be told every day that they are not done because someone said they were done. Alina wanted to do that work, and we never had the money. Now we do. He looked at Travis. He said, your grandfather paid for Alina's family to keep their land. I am paying that forward. He looked at Ezekiel. He said, Mr. Boone, you will run the place. You will live in the back bedroom my mother used to sew in. You will not lift a hay bale unless you want to. You will tell those kids what you told me today, every year on the anniversary of when I came home. Ezekiel did not answer with words. He nodded twice. Then he sat down because his knees gave out. Daniel walked out of the dining room. He stepped onto the porch. He looked across the long gravel road. He saw the rise where he had once turned back at the age of 19 and not looked. He looked now. The Montana wind moved through the dry grass in slow waves. He stood there for a long time. The first thing Daniel did the next morning was drive to the cemetery. He went to his mother's grave. He brushed dirt off the stone with his fingers. He sat down on the grass. He told her about Alina and about Rose and Samuel, and about the $18 they had started with, and about the small house in Fargo. He told her he had not come back because he had promised. He told her he was sorry it had taken so long. He stayed for an hour. Then he walked 20 steps to his father's freshly turned grave. He stood at the foot of it. He did not kneel. He did not weep. He said one sentence. I forgive you, old man. He turned and walked away. The probate took 6 months. There were tense conversations and a few hard moments. Wyatt offered to buy out his brother's share twice. Daniel refused both times. Caleb asked if Daniel would let him help build the new program. Daniel said yes. Caleb spent the winter rebuilding the corral fences with his own hands, the way their father had taught them as boys. Ruth moved her sewing machine back into the cedar log house and made curtains for every bedroom the kids would sleep in. She also opened the trunk in the attic and pulled out Marlene's old quilts. She washed them and folded them and laid one on every bed. Joseph the deputy ran background checks on the staff and worked out a quiet arrangement with the county social services office. Travis did not come around for the first 2 months. He was a corporate lawyer in Denver, and he had a lot to think about. Then he showed up one Saturday in jeans and a work shirt and asked what needed doing. Daniel handed him a hammer. They roofed the bunkhouse together. They did not say much. They did not need to. There was one more conversation that mattered. It happened on a cold March evening in front of the kitchen stove. Wyatt drove out from town alone. He sat at the table where the envelope had been laid down. He held a coffee mug in both hands. He said, "Daniel, I need to tell you something." Daniel waited. Wyatt said, "I knew. About a year before Father died, I went into his desk looking for an insurance paper, and I found a copy of the real will. I read it. I put it back. I never told Caleb or Ruth. I told myself Father would change his mind. I told myself the family would never survive the truth. The real reason was simpler. I was afraid of giving back what I had taken from you." Daniel did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "Thank you for telling me, Wyatt." Wyatt cried. It was the first time Daniel had ever seen his older brother cry. Daniel poured him more coffee. The Hayes Cromwell place opened in the spring of 2024. The first kid through the door was a 15-year-old boy from Great Falls, whose stepfather had locked him out of the trailer for the last time. He arrived in the back of a social worker's car carrying a black trash bag. Daniel met him at the porch. Daniel did not hug him. He just shook his hand the way his father had once shaken hands when a deal was real. He said, "Son, this is your house now." The boy did not cry until later that night when he was alone in his room. But he stayed. He learned to ride a horse by the end of summer. He learned to read a brand book. He graduated high school the following spring, and Daniel sat in the front row and clapped until his palms went red. By the end of the first year, 9 kids lived in the cedar log house. By the end of the second year, 15 did. Caleb taught them to work cattle. Ruth taught the girls to cook for a crew of 20. Joseph drove the long blue pickup that took them to school in town. Travis came up from Denver one weekend a month and taught them how to read a contract. Wyatt did not have an official job. He just sat on the porch in the afternoons and listened to whoever needed to talk. The kids called him Uncle Wyatt by the second summer. He cried again the first time he heard it. Ezekiel Boone stood up at the first Sunday supper in the cedar log house in 52 years. He took off his hat. He told the kids around the long oak table the story of a young man who had been thrown off this land for loving the wrong girl and who had come back 52 years later carrying a piece of paper. He told it slowly. The kids listened. When he was done, one of them asked what happened to the young man. Ezekiel pointed across the table at the gray-haired man, sitting quietly with a fork in his hand. He said, "He is right there. He came home. And so will you when your time comes." Daniel Cromwell lived in the cedar log house for the rest of his years. He died in the back bedroom in 2031 at the age of 79. The kids buried him next to a leaner in Fargo because that was where he had asked to be. On his headstone, his daughter Rose carved 4 words. He came home twice. The land is still working. The kids still come. And on the wall of the dining room above the long oak table hangs a single framed envelope behind glass. There is no money in it anymore. There is only a folded piece of paper that says everything a father could not say in life. It is the first thing every new arrival is shown. It is the last thing every departing graduate touches before they walk down the gravel road. Not one of them has ever looked back.